So what I'd like to do in about 45 minutes or so is see if I can't give all of you sort of a way of thinking about strategy. Strategy is a word that gets used a lot. It gets used almost indiscriminately to describe a lot of different things. But I think at the core, we all sort of have the gestalt of strategy. Strategy is kind of the big picture of how the organization is going to win in its environment, whatever that is. And but yet, what that really means and how to think about it is actually still an issue that I find a lot of management teams of major companies struggle with. And so my hope is that in a very short amount of time, we can talk about kind of some of the essential ideas of strategy. I'll be talking a lot, mostly about the kind of for-profit world, but these ideas are equally applicable to any organization, any NGO, any nonprofit that's actually serving a customer in any way. And I do have a few slides at the end, which I may or may not have time to cover, which actually give you the bridge between for-profit and nonprofit. So I'd like to suggest that this way of thinking is ultimately going to have a profound impact on the success of any organization. It's not the only thing that matters, as we'll see. A good strategy poorly executed is not going to succeed. But ultimately what we learn over and over again is just good execution rarely allows you to be truly superior and truly change the world in whatever you're trying to do. You actually need to have a great strategic sense of how your organization is going to compete. And so let's talk about that today. The slides here that I'll show, of course, we'll make available to you. We'll also leave time for some Q&A at the end. And I understand that Buck has some questions for you that he's going to ask you to respond to later on. So I guess that's at least some modest incentive to pay attention even more than you ordinarily would. So let's talk about strategy. Let's talk about what we mean by a strategy. Let's talk about kind of the key ideas in strategy. And I think the starting point for that is really to step quite far back and ask, what is the fundamental sort of strategic challenge of any organization? And here, what I find is that many managers and leaders in organizations really start the whole process of thinking about strategy on the wrong foot. I think most organizations, I think, when they try to understand what am I trying to do in my industry, in my marketplace, they think that their job is really to be the best organization in their industry, the best car company, the best retail bank, the best maker of toothpaste. And to be the best, we have to come up with the best product and the best service and the best supply chain and the best customer support model. And if we can figure out in our organization how to be the best, how to get it right in terms of all those key dimensions, we will ultimately win. That's the kind of thinking process that most organizations follow still to this day, at least in my experience. And I'm very privileged. I get to work on strategy with hundreds of organizations in every possible field over the course of a year or two of my work. Now, what we've come to understand, I think, is that is a very dangerous way of thinking about competition, and it's a very dangerous way of thinking about strategy. Indeed, there is no best company in any industry. That whole idea is, kind of flawed from the very start. What's the best car or the best car company? Well, it really all depends, doesn't it? It really depends on what needs that company is trying to serve. The best car to serve a middle-income person is not the best car to serve somebody living in an urban area with no parking space, and that's not the best car to serve, other needs. What's the best retail bank? Well, it all depends on who the customer is and what the customer's needs are. There's lots of different customers in virtually every business, and what we find is it's impossible to be the best at serving every need of every customer. That is a fundamentally flawed way of thinking about what the job is of any organization. Instead, in thinking about strategy, really the starting point is not being the best. The starting point is thinking about how we can be unique, how an organization actually can create unique value for the customers it's seeking to serve. That is the essential starting point for thinking about strategy. If you're actually delivering unique value to the customer you choose to serve, you will truly be able to win. Whereas if you're trying to be the best at sort of competing in the industry, what that tends to lead to is kind of a zero-sum competition, where companies actually ultimately start to do the same thing and ultimately are not able to succeed in the long run. So the fundamental question of strategy is really not about being the best, but it's about being unique.